A dear friend, Ivan the gorilla, is coming home to Tacoma. The iconic circus store gorilla that was a favorite of young and old while at the BNI before leaving to join other gorillas in a more natural setting at Zoo Atlanta will be immortalized in bronze as part of the beloved Ivan project. Hello, my name is Douglas Granum, and it's been my honor and privilege to work on bringing Ivan back larger than life. I've been working on a sculpture that shows Ivan contemplating a magnolia blossom on the first day of his release into his new natural enclosure in Zoo Atlanta. The statue, a cooperative effort of the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation, the Metropolitan Park Board, and the wide community, will be dedicated this summer, August 19th, and will greet generations of Ivan's fans as they visit the zoo. Ivan's statue will remind us, all of us, of his playfulness, his intelligence, and majesty, and will tell a larger story about endangered species, gorillas in the wild, and the need to conserve habitat for the future.
The Johnson family, Helen and Reuben Johnson, they owned the pet shop at the store, and they agreed to take Ivan, and he slept with Larry Johnson, and for 3 years they were best friends, and Larry would bring him everywhere, and finally Ivan started to play in the house and swinging from curtains and lamps and just tearing things apart. You know, you got a gorilla that's 3 years old and it's getting to be big and wants to play, and we just had to move him.
It was an event, but I don't think we realized what we were in for. I don't think we fully understood how we were going to bond with this guy and how he would become part of our family. Literally would become the little brother that nobody wanted to talk about. Gorillas are very troop-oriented, they're very family-oriented, and for some reason he chose me to bond as his alpha, basically. The connection you have with this wonderfully intelligent creature, and most folks don't acknowledge how smart gorillas really are, but he was very instinctive, very loving, and very trusting. And once we bonded, it was inseparable. We rode motorcycles together. He would hop on the back and off we'd go. And if he got excited, he'd start doing this on my helmet, and I'd start trying to keep control of the bike. But we just did stuff together. Everything I did, he did. Yep. We had bonded, but 37 months in, with literally not a stick of furniture left in our house that was even worthy of reupholstering. It was literally shredded down to the frames. We had endured no nightlife, no friends for the holidays, no family for the holidays. It was just too disruptive to the lifestyle. It was just difficult to have any sort of a gathering, like, oh, excuse my 70-pound gorilla. You know, oh, I'm sorry, he just grabbed your leg and flipped you over. You don't cast off family members easily. That's all I can say. For as much as a pain in the rear as he was a joy to have around. He was always into something and always entertaining. It was just part of the clan.
Is that people really didn't know what gorillas were. We had 2 zoos that had gorillas, were supposedly experts in gorillas, and they told us that when you house a gorilla, you put him in a cage, you lock the door, and you never go in with him again. And the phrase they used, this one person used, and I was there, is that, haven't you heard of King Kong? So people thought that the gorillas were really ferocious and really mean animals, like King Kong. That was the only exposure they ever had to it. But they weren't, not at all. And Ivan went in, and then we broke the touch contact, and the people were there and says, no, don't go in. Don't go in, you can't go in. Because he's gonna, this is about the time in their life they'll start to kill you. Well, after several years, and we finally found out that was nonsense, you lose that touch contact, and you don't know what he would do. You're still playing from kind of a basis that you don't really know for sure what it's going to do, but you know the King Kong isn't right. I made the decision, and so did my father, not to let anybody in. Unfortunately, people, he loved watching people, loved scaring them. He'd go in the corner and he'd come around and he'd bang on that window. And I've seen people, you could hear them all the way across the store screaming. And if he got tired of that, he'd go back in the back, and there was 1 or 2 handlers back there to play with him. Then he'd take a nap, or he'd come back out, look at the people. It was his choice. Years ago, they had something happened, and there was 2 or 3 reporters, and I can remember one of the questions asked. He says, well, why don't you let your pet gorilla go? And I thought that was such an odd thing for somebody to think, that Ivan would have been a pet, because he certainly wasn't. It was really emotional back then when we lost, when we moved. The whole thing was just the whole thing got ugly there. It was just kind of overwhelming. And it was a bad part of everybody's life back then. And it was a good part for Ivan. So it ended up really good. They've got 27 gorillas at Atlanta Zoo, which I don't really understand why they'd want 27. You only got 3 outdoor compounds, so they're going to be sitting in the back a lot. But of all the gorillas they had, all the other gorillas would sit way back in the back, kind of be by themselves. The only gorilla that came down to the window and would just sit there and just look at the people was Ivan, because he was used to that. He was used to being around people. When Earl and my nephew and my niece Tina got back from there, we were talking about it because it surprised them how large of a following he had there. And then I started seeing all the, I've had phone calls, hundreds of phone calls, and you see the News Tribune, and you see the different TV channels, and the outpouring of emotion here also. And we just thought it would be, I'm not even sure who came up with the idea, to have a memorial for him somewhere. Well, it's trying to tell a story of Ivan, and that there's something different.
He's a Northwest icon. He entertained a lot of people for a lot of years, and as our knowledge grew about captivity of a certain species, or any animal indeed, we became more and more aware, and we formed our own opinions whether it was good or bad. My opinion was Ivan didn't know anything else. This was his world. He didn't know what he didn't know. So he was in no way being harmed mentally or spiritually or physically. This is where I belong. This is my space. Fear of him moving back. Are you going to assimilate? Are you going to be okay? All of these things come into play. Bottom line is, he entertained a lot of folks for a lot of years, and a lot of people loved Ivan. So him getting a permanent bronze somewhere in the vicinity warms my heart. It acknowledges who he was to the people of the Northwest, and I think kind of like the J.P. Gertrude statue in Seattle. You see it and it just, this flood of really cool memories comes back, and your acknowledgement of who he was in your life gets to live for a moment again. So I'm thrilled that someone's put their shoulder into this and is pushing it forward.